Okay, so today's topic, first of all, I thank you to Chaya Rivka Carasso, who sponsored in memory of her father after she makes hamotzi. Or you can talk, you can't talk. No, about to make hamotzi? Okay. We'll hear the name, and that's what we'll be learning in memory of. Today's topic, as tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh Adar, is the start of the month of Adar. And this is a year where we have a double month of Adar. So I thought we would dedicate today's learning towards understanding why we have the two Adars, and when we do have the two Adars, which is the true Adar, which is the true month of Adar, and it has its ramifications in a number of ways. It has its ramifications when it comes to a yortzeit. Many people have been asking me. It has its ramifications when it comes to bar mitzvah, and of course it has its ramifications when it comes to the holiday that we celebrate in Adar, which is the holiday of Purim, and also the special haftorot that precede and follow Purim. First of all, the reason why we have a double Adar is very simply a combination of a pasuk and, well, actually two psukim and science. And the two psukim is, amen. The two psukim, number one is that we are commanded, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chadashim. This month will be for you the first of the months, that we are instructed to work with a lunar calendar. Okay? Now, a lunar calendar comes out to 29.05, and then a bunch of other numbers, days, 29 and a half, approximately 29 and a half days each month from the time that the moon appears, waxes great, diminishes, disappears, reappears. It's 29 and a half days. So if you do simple mathematics, if it's 30 times 12, it's 360, right? 29 would be, right, 2 and a half is 6 less than that. So we're talking about 354 days to a lunar year. And the solar year is 365 and change days. Therefore, the lunar year is 11 days shorter than the solar year. And the Muslims who in fact follow a lunar calendar without any corrections built into that calendar, so therefore in fact their holidays progressively move earlier each year by 11 days. So therefore a holiday, a Ramadan, which might have started in the summer, then moves to the spring, and then moves to the winter, and then moves to the fall, and then works its way back into the summer. That is a lunar calendar that is not adjusted. The second pasuk that I alluded to before is that the Torah tells us that Pesach must be b'chodesh ha'aviv. Pesach must be in the month of spring. Nisan, we know, is the month of spring. So therefore, if we're going with a non-adjusted lunar calendar, Pesach is not going to be in the month of spring after a number of years. You're going 11 days earlier, right? By 3 years, you're a month earlier. You're already in the, what do they call it? The Arctic blast. What's the East Coast being hit with now?
Ice Age.
The Ice Age. Yeah, pretty close to it. Okay, so therefore the Torah tells us, and very briefly, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but very briefly, the reason, or a reason I should better say, why Pesach needs to be in the month of Aviv, and all the holidays need to be in their respective seasons, is because we view that the physical world is a shadow, is a representation of what's going on in the spiritual world. Now, the time of the Exodus, Yetziat Mitzrayim, that was a time of amazing renewal, where a nation that had been subjugated for 210 years was now about to begin their destiny as a free people, as a God fearing God, serving people, as a Torah receiving people. It was a time for a whole awakening. Now, that spiritual opportunity for awakening manifests itself in this physical world by spring. Spring is a time of physical awakening, where all the things which have laid dormant in the winter now come to life, now start to flower, now start to blossom. That is an indication of what's happening in the spiritual realm. And our holidays are aligned with what's happening, the opportunities in the spiritual realm. And the way we know what's happening in the spiritual realm is often through the shadows, the manifestations that take place in the physical. Therefore, Pesach has got to be springtime, because springtime is the physical rejuvenation that we experience here, which is an example or a reflection of the spiritual coming to life that is available for every person at the time of Nisan Pesach, which was utilized fully during that time of the Exodus, and we revisit that opportunity and that season and that availability every year. So if we're falling behind 11 days every year, so then what we have is we have a system now set already with a calendar, and that gives us, out of every 19 years, we have 7 leap years. Okay? And if you just do the round math, so if you have 19 times 11, 19 times 10 is 190, add another 19 for times 11, you have 209. 7 years on that 19-year cycle, you're adding an extra month. 7 times 30 is 210. Now, each one is not exactly 1.5, it's the half to 9.5, and that's how we coincide every 19 years. That is why when a person is born, right, it shouldn't come as a surprise that their Hebrew and English birthday are the same, because that is the day of their birth. 19 years later, right, usually every 19 years, their Hebrew and English birthdays once again coincide. And we're going to see some very interesting situations. We'll see an example of it. Some very interesting situations that come up as a result of these extra months. But basically, 7 out of every 19 years, we have a leap year that we call, which is the month of Adar. We have an Adar Aleph, and we have Adar Bet. We have 2 months of Adar as we make our way towards Nisan, towards the month of Pesach, of that Chodesh Ha'aviv. So, the 3 points that we'd like to deal with today are: how do these 2 months affect the Purim celebration? How do these 2 months affect the commemoration of a yahrzeit? And how do these 2 months, or how do we treat these 2 months when it comes to not the celebration? The celebration is really a real sideshow, but a boy or a girl becoming B'nai Mitzvah. At what point are they truly B'nai Mitzvah, fully obligated in all of the mitzvot? Now, we might have hoped or imagined that it's going to be either Adar Aleph is the main Adar, and all 3 of those points will fall in line with Adar Aleph, or Adar Bet. Right? May the real Adar please stand up. And I might have thought whichever the real Adar is, so that is the one that would dictate Purim, yahrzeit, and Bar Mitzvah. We're going to soon see that that's actually not the case. Okay, at least according to the minhag of Bnei Ashkenaz, that is not the case. So on the sheets that we have, and this is all Le'iloi Nishmat, your father's name, Chayrivka?
Chaim Leib.
Chaim Leib Ben. His father, do you know?
Moshe.
Chaim Leib Ben Moshe.
Actually, my cousin passed away 2 days before him. A different year. I'm not sure of a Hebrew name, but I think it's Leah.
Okay, and also for your cousin Leah.
Leah, yeah.
Okay. So we're going to start with the Gemara. And the Gemara, I had to do a little bit of cutting and pasting, so you'll pardon some of those lines. We have, and 1, 2, and 3, you can follow us either in the Gemara up top, or you can follow us in the English on that same page where it has the number 1, 2, and 3. It jumps around a little bit in order to fit all the pieces in. So the Mishnah said, and the Mishnah is not yet in the Gemara, is not yet in English translation, so bear with me those who are following in the English. The Mishnah says, Korat Megillah ba'Adar Rishon. If they read the Megillah in the first month of Adar, Vinit Abra Hashana. Right, the second line where it says bold lettered Masnisim. Vinit Abra Hashana. And then they turned it into a leap year. Koran Tava Adar Sheni. Koran Tava Adar Sheni. It must be reread in Adar Sheni. So this Mishnah seems to be clearly saying, at least when it comes to Purim, that the real Adar is the second Adar. You read it already in the first Adar, they added the second month, you've got to reread it. So therefore reading it in that first month was practice and was almost practice is kindly, I'll say, almost irrelevant. Right? It's like if we were to read the Megillah today, it's not going to make a difference when Purim rolls around, we still need to read the Megillah. So reading it in the first month has accomplished nothing, and it must be reread in the second month.
But isn't that because there's a connection between Purim and Pesach?
Let's see.
But why would they even start reading? I mean, the Megillah on Adar.
Okay, you make an excellent point, Ofer. And it seems over here we're talking about a case, and that's also going to appear somewhat in halacha. We seem to talk about a case where they read the Megillah, not yet knowing that they were going to be adding the second Adar.
Oh, come on, that doesn't. It sounds kind of. Why would they know? I mean, these things are planned in advance.
Well, yes and no. Right? Nowadays, we've got a calendar. I've got on my desktop a calendar on my computer desktop, which can bring me to the year, back to the year, or who knows what, and send me centuries up, right, to see exactly what will be. But when it was being determined, by the witnesses coming, right, so then it wasn't always done in advance, or it could be that people just, the Mishnah of Nit Abra Hashana, they read it, and then the year was made into a leap year. Now there are different factors. That could be actually a whole of Lunch and Learn. What are the factors that would push them to actually make it a Shana Mu'uberes, and how we view that? Right? So something happened afterwards. Normally it's done in advance. Something happened, and they had to, at a last minute, after Adar Aleph, after 15th of Adar Aleph already, they instituted a second one.
So can I ask another question that relates to this? Why even the month of Adar was chosen? Why not a month like Shvat or Tevet?
For what? For Purim?
For
the leap year. For the added.
Okay, so again, right, the Gemara Rosh Hashanah works through that. Again, that's a whole other issue. Why we're adding that on. It's another lunch and learn. You get another lunch for that. Okay? So the Mishnah said they read the Megillah on Adar Rishon, and then it became a leap year. Koran Osah. Now you have to reread it in Adar Sheni. Again, the reading that you did in the first Adar didn't accomplish anything. Ein bein Adar Harishon la Adar Hasheni. There's no difference between Adar Rishon and Adar Sheni. Ella only Kriyat HaMegillah, the reading of the Megillah, Umatanot le'Evyonim, and the gifts to the Evyonim, right? The gifts that we give to the poor, and along with that comes all the laws of Purim. There's no difference besides that. But in regard to other things, they are the same. Now, for our purposes, the way that both months are the same is that on the 14th and the 15th, right, we don't fast, we don't eulogize, we treat them as happy days, both months. There are those that say, like Ofer wanted to say, well, that's only in a case where you only found out about it afterwards. Right. But when you knew about it beforehand, maybe the first month should not have any vestige at all, and the 14th and 15th should be like any other day, and we would say Tachanun, and we could eulogize, but that's not the halacha. The halacha is the 14th and 15th of both months are treated as happy days. But let's get to the issue now. Why is it that, which is the issue the Gemara deals with, why is it that Purim is specifically celebrated in the second month of Adar? And the Gemara, until the point where I enclosed there, Shnei and Mikra Echad Darshu, the Gemara actually brought two different opinions. If the real Adar, when it comes to Purim, should be the first Adar, or should be the second Adar. Ushnei, and the Gemara says, and here's where the English picks up, Ushneim, by number one there, Ushneim Mikra Echad Darshu. Both of these two opinions, they based it on the very same pasuk. There's one verse, and each of them walked away with a different understanding of that verse. What is the verse? B'chol shana v'shana. The Megillah instructs us that Purim should be celebrated each and every year. Now, each and every year seems to be saying that every year is going to be similar in its celebration. Well, Rav Yossi Savar Loza says, B'chol shana v'shana, each and every year. Okay. Ma kol shana v'shana Adar asamach l'shvat. Every year, it's the Adar that comes, the month of Adar comes immediately after the month of Shvat. Afkan, so to over here, when there are two Adars, which will you pick? The one that comes immediately after Shvat. So that's why he says it's the first one. Rashba Gomer Shem Galil Savar, no. Because Shana B'Shana. Each and every year has got to be the same. Ma kol shana v'shana, in a classic year where there's only one Adar. Which Adar is it? It's Adar HaSamach L'Nisan. It's the Adar that comes prior to Nisan, the month of Nisan that follows Adar. Afkan, so to over here, when you have two Adars, which one will you pick? Adar HaSamach L'Nisan. Now, so the pasuk is really nondescript. It does not clearly guide us either towards which one. So, Bishlam Rav Yossi. So if we're going to pick one of the two, it makes sense, like Rabbi Elazar said. You should pick the first one. Taima, Mistaver time, his reasoning is logical. Why? Because we have a general rule which says, Ein de'ein ma'avirin al ha-mitzvot. We don't pass a mitzvah by. So therefore, if it's either the first Adar or the second Adar, we should grab hold of the first opportunity. Ein ma'avirin al ha-mitzvah. Let's not just walk past a mitzvah. Let's not just let it go. And therefore we should do it in Adar Rishon. Elo Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who says no, we let the first Adar pass by and we celebrate it in the second month of Adar. My Tameh, what is his reasoning? Amar Rav Tevi explains, Tama, the reason of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is Misamech Geula LeGeula Adif. He says because you want to have back-to-back Geula. Geula is redemption. Now Nisan, as we mentioned before, that is the month of the great redemption, the Yetziat Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt, and therefore you want to have this back-to-back Geula. How do you have back-to-back Geula? By having Purim in the second month of Adar, followed immediately, 30 days later, by Pesach in the month of Nisan. So even though normally we have this value that we want to not pass by a mitzvah, here there's a reason to push it off.
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Yes.
At the beginning you said about spring and the flowers and the blessing of the spiritual and what is happening in the spiritual world is happening here. Is this connected? How is all this days and calendars and things, is it to line up with the spiritual world?
Yeah, that's why Pesach has to be in the month of spring in order that our celebration here of reflowering, of rejuvenation, should be at a time when there's that spiritual availability of rejuvenation.
So it
Drop the
means
solar calendar. Why make it so hard?
So there's a reason why we need to follow the lunar calendar.
Right, so it means at this point, there is a spiritual awakening within us.
There is a spiritual availability for us to access.
Okay, I feel better, okay. You'll talk about how we access?
Well,
Story.
the way we access that is through the mitzvot of those holidays.
Of what?
The mitzvot of each of those holidays.
The holidays, the holidays of the.
Yeah. Okay.
Is
So-
Hanukkah's availability, you know how they say
Hanukkah?
the half an hour after you light candles, is about the same?
I'd rather not veer too far off. Let's
Okay.
let's try to stay somewhat on topic. Elosh my time. What's his reasoning? So he said, "Misamech geula legeula adif." Right? We want to have the geula and the geula back to back. Omar, he says, "Time with the reason." Shem Gamliel mehacha. It's from here. The verse says, "Lekayim et igeret hapurim hazot hashenit." The pasuk says to establish this letter, this decree of Purim, hashenit, the second. And he understands that to mean, when should it be established? When there are two potential months, it should be established in hashenit, in the second. The Isruch Lemiktav hashenit, now go right beneath there, we just turn the page of the Gemara. This is the Miktav B'chol Shana V'Shana. We need to write the second, and we need to write each and every year. If I only had the Chol Shana V'Shana, Hava Mina Ki Kushyan. I might have thought we should do it the first one. You don't want to pass it by. Therefore, Kamashul and Hashenit. Therefore, it said, I'm over here. Therefore, it said Hashenit. V'yash Me'inan. In English, I'm now on number 3. V'yash Me'inan. And if it said Hashenit, if only said Hashenit, the second, Hava Mina, I would have thought B'tchila B'rishon Uv'sheni. I might have thought, right, and many teenagers would enjoy this idea. When there are two Adars, what should we do? Have two Adars. Have two Purims. Celebrate it twice. Kamash lo mechol shana v'shana. That's why it says each and every year that no, just like in a regular year you have one Purim celebration, so too in the year that you have the two Adars, you still only have one Purim celebration. Interestingly, and then we'll go to the other sources. So the one who says that we celebrate the first Adar, what does he do with the pasuk which says the second? He says, he says Hashenit, the second, is not referring to the month. Rather, it's referring to the establishment of Purim as a holiday. And according to him, there were stages towards its being implemented, instituted as a holiday. First, it was a Shushan-wide holiday. It was the city of Shushan. They celebrated their own personal deliverance. It was not until Hashenit, it was not until later, the next year, that it was established as a holiday for all of Bnei Yisrael. So therefore, there were two stages towards Purim being implemented. And I would venture to say that ties into what we were discussing before. If it's just a wonderful thing that happened to this city, then every year Shushan needs to express their thanks to God. It's their personal thanks to God for what happened. But if this has become a national Chag for all children of Israel, that means that this is a new station that has been created. It's not that the next year we remember what happened, but the next year we are re-entering, the same way Pesach, every Nisan, we re-enter that pavilion known as rejuvenation and Geula, and what was available at the time of the Exodus is there again for us to access. So therefore, it's only the next year that they knew for sure that this has been actually a new pavilion that's been created. Kabbalat HaTorah me'ava, the accepting of the Torah out of love, the recognizing of God's intimate involvement in all that goes on in this world from behind the scenes. All of that which Purim is made of, that is there every year at that time, one can access that. And that's why they established it at the second year. Actually, in the Ma'oz Tzur, right? So we say, B'nei Vina Yemei Shmona Kavu Shir Urananim. the B'nai Vina, those with understanding, Yemei Shmona, 8 days they established, meaning why did it take B'nai Vina, people of understanding? Oh, people of the understanding of the spiritual sensitivity who sensed that that which was there during the year of Hanukkah is back again. That's why they established it as a yearly holiday. So, lahalacha, it is very clear that when it comes to Purim, it is the second Adar that is celebrated. We had two opinions in the Gemara. The Mishnah left no room. The Mishnah Paskin or Rebbe, right, showed that his inclination was to say that it's the second Adar that is the Adar for Purim. But from the Gemara, though, we do see something else. So why don't we then say, oh, so that clearly shows us that the real Adar, may the real Adar please stand up. What is the real Adar? The second Adar. We see that's the case of here by Purim. So why doesn't our discussion stop right there in terms of the other cases, in terms of a yortzeit, in terms of a bar mitzvah, and say the Gemara ruled that the second Adar is the Adar for Purim, so that means that's the real Adar, and the first one is just a filler. So why doesn't that end our discussion and say when it comes to yortzeit, it's the second Adar. When it comes to B'nai Mitzvah, it's the second Adar. What do we see in the Gemara why we wouldn't say that? Yes, Janet.
Well, those cases, Yartzeit, B'nai Mitzvot may be similar to a rejuvenation or a transition like that. But a Yartzeit might be a different case that isn't necessarily that type of redemption or because
Perhaps, but I'm
those
asking.
people are already at a level of spirituality with Hashem.
But I'm asking, based on what we just now saw in the Gemara, how could we explain that it's not conversation over? That we've just established the second Adar is the Adar, end of discussion.
Well, that's what I'm saying, different precedent. So then...
But I'm saying from what we saw in the Gemara, you're offering your own idea, which is a nice idea. But I'm saying from what we saw in the Gemara, how, right, if I were to say to you, so we see from here, the second Adar is the true Adar, you might say to me, no, I think we see the opposite. The reason is, remember, the Gemara first said, why does it make sense to choose the first one? Ein mavirin al ha-mitzvot. You don't want to pass by a mitzvah. Why didn't we say that over here? Because there was an outside factor. What was the outside factor? Mesamech geula legeula adif. The Gemara said, oh, you want to have redemption back to back with redemption. Oh, so when it comes to Purim, which is a celebration of redemption, that's why we get pushed off of our original value, which is don't pass by a mitzvah, and that's why it gets pushed off to the second one. But in terms of the other cases, be it yortzeit, be it bar mitzvah, where we don't have this competing value to say, no, we want to have it second month next to Nisan, so then we should go with our original value. What was our original value? Don't pass by a mitzvah. So in the Gemara, there are two ways of looking at it. You can look at the Gemara and say, oh, the Gemara shows us the real Adar is the second Adar. Or you can say, no, the opposite. The Gemara shows us that the real Adar, that when it comes to Purim, where we have a competing value, that's why we left our usual don't pass by a mitzvah, don't pass by an opportunity, and we waited till the second month, because there we had a competing value of geula, back to back. But where there is no competing value, from the Gemara, I might say it's indicated that you should in fact do it in the first Adar. So therefore, when it comes to the other two cases, I was waiting to do that, sorry. When it comes to the other two cases, right?
Are you from Brooklyn?
Yeah, I drink soda. Yeah. So when it comes to the other two cases, we really can't prove one way or the other from the Gemara. So now let's turn the page and let's look at the Shulchan Aruch when it deals with the laws of Ta'anit. Okay? And this again you have both in Hebrew and in English, so feel free to follow. Right? On the first page, on the top over here, in the English it's going to be halacha number 7, right? Zayin up top. Now, these are the laws of ta'anit, the laws of fasting. We're not really discussing the laws of Kaddish, we're discussing the custom that many had to fast on the day that they have a yard site. Right? I would say mostly nowadays the custom is, instead of fasting, one actually makes a little bit of a kiddush. One brings some cake and some soda, maybe some schnapps, and people partake, people make brachot, blessings when they eat, and all of those extra brachot serve to elevate the soul of the person, because all those brachot are being made for that, right, because of that person. So we're talking about over here, halacha zayin in the Shulchan Aruch. I'm going to have the Hebrew and the English. Kisheira yom shemet aviv o imo ba'adar. If it happened that a person's mother or father passed away during the month of Adar, and that year there was only one Adar, and now this year when they want to commemorate the yard site, what's being discussed over here is by fasting, Vashana Mu'uberet. Now it is a Shana Mu'uberet. What should he do? The Shulchan Aruch says, Yit'aneh ba'adar bet. He should fast in Adar bet, in the second Adar. That's what the Shulchan Aruch rules. However, go to the next page, right? Just look down now over there, where again we have it highlighted. This is the gloss, and right there in English where it says gloss, because the Shulchan Aruch is written by Rav Yosef Karo, who follows, and the Sfardim follow his rulings, but where the Ashkenazim have a different custom, then that is presented by the gloss, the Haggah, written by Rav Moshe Isserles, known as the Ramah. So, 1 second. So on the page, here's where we start, everybody. Here's the top. Now go down to here, this page. Okay? So now you have these two pages. We just read in English over there, and now you'll read in English on this page over here. Everybody see where I am?
Yeah.
Right over here. Okay?
It is Mishnah and Brewer.
We're not the Mishnah, we're still up above, where it says gloss, up above in italics.
Thank you.
The Ramah says, V'yesh omrim. There are those that say, Di'it'aneh b'rishon. No. You should fast where? In the first Adar. That's the Maharil, and the Mari Mintz. Im lo shemei b'shnat ha'ibur b'adar sheni. Unless he passed away, the mother or father passed away, when there were 2 Adars that year. Then, da'az no'agin l'tanot b'sheni. If the person passed away in the second one, then you will commemorate the yard site in the second one. But if the year the person passed away there was only 1 Adar, now that there's a second, now the yard site year, now there are 2 Adars. Where do you commemorate the yard site? The Ramah says in the first Adar. V'chein haminhag, and that is the custom. Litanot, to fast berishon, in the first one. So the Kaddish, the fasting, the yard site is commemorated in this first Adar that's starting tomorrow or Shabbos. That in the first Adar, that is when the yard sites are commemorated. There are those who have a custom to fast on both months of Adar. Now take a look in the Mishnah Brura. Okay, the Mishnah Brura, if you look back on the page above it, where it said 41 there, look at note 41, in which one's father and mother died in Adar is a leap year. This is the ruling of the year when one's father and mother died was not a leap year, and the years which have followed afterwards, a leap year has occurred. The author of the Shulchan Aruch is of the opinion that the common Adar is the second Adar. There are authorities who say the opposite. In addition, with respect to the matter discussed here, there's a further reason for giving preference to the first Adar. What's the reason to give preference to the first Adar?
We're Jewish, that's why it's like.
I'm sorry?
We're Jewish, so it's totally confused. Everybody wants to argue.
Well, no, because one should not bypass the mitzvah. That's the other value that we had. We don't want to pass by a mitzvah, but should perform them immediately when they present themselves. Yes.
As far as bypassing a mitzvah, does that actually mean right then and there? I mean, not bypass doesn't mean that you are allowed to delay?
Well, the idea that we don't pass by a mitzvah is learned from Avram Avinu when he went to do the circumcision in the Brit Milah for Yitzchak. And it says, Vayashkem Avraham baboker. Avram got up early in the morning. Now, we will allow a Brit to be done later in the day, and sometimes there are other values at play which say, okay, we need to push it off. But ideally, mitzvah baliyadcha al tachmid tzara.
But it's not a hard absolute.
It doesn't negate you doing it at a later point. Better late than never. I mean, as long as you're still within the prescribed period. Right? You want to keep Shabbos on Sunday, it's not going to help. I'm not going to say better late than never. Right? 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 But when it comes to the circumcision, ideally you want to do it early in the morning, if not, right? And if you didn't do it that day, then you do it ASAP, right? Not on Shabbos. Right? That's another issue. Okay.
Rabbi?
Yes, Dov.
Also, it makes a lot of trouble for the Yetzer Hara.
I'm not sure what you mean, Dov.
A person who wants to do a mitzvah right away.
Oh, yes. So in general, that is correct. That is correct. Okay. Now, in 42, which we're not going to go through right now, there he works about if a person made a certain neder, etc. But we see over here that when it comes to Yortzeit, the minhag of Bnei Ashkenaz is ein mavirin al ha-mitzvot. You're not going to let that mitzvah just go and pass by, and therefore it's the first Adar that we do our that we commemorate as the Yortzeit.
In the Sfaradim is
That's what that's how I didn't ask Ray Perez. That's what I would imagine. Normally they follow the minhag of the they follow the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, now let's turn and go to the very last page on the booklet. And this is Hilchot Brachot, the laws of Brachot, Simin Nun Hey. And first the Shulchan Aruch discusses a very interesting case. This actually is a riddle that was posed. How can you have a person who was born weeks later than someone else, and yet he'll celebrate his bar mitzvah weeks before the other person? Right? How do you have a person born weeks after someone else, and yet he'll celebrate his bar mitzvah weeks before that other person? So you take a look again, Hebrew and English, it's number 10 in English, Yud. Im nar echad, if one child, Nolad, was born, b'chaf tet, he was born on the 29th day, la'adar rishon, of the first Adar, Mishana Me'uberet, right? Of a year that had a double Adar year. V'nar achad nolad ba'adar sheni be'echad bo. And another child was born 2 days later, right? Or a day later, on Adar Sheni, the first day of Adar Sheni. So one was born day 29 of Adar 1. Yeah. The other one was born the next day, let's say, day 1 of Adar 2. So boy number 1 is 1 day older than boy number 2. Ushnat Yud Gimel, but during the Bar Mitzvah year, Eina Mu'uberet, there's only one Adar. So now what happens? Now so the boy was born 29 Adar Aleph, when there's only one Adar, right? So his bar mitzvah is the 29th of Adar. The one who was born the first day of second Adar, now his bar mitzvah year, there's only one Adar, so it's the first day of the one Adar that he celebrated his bar mitzvah. So he was born a day later, his bar mitzvah will be 4 weeks, 28 days beforehand. Okay. So again, the one who was born on the 29th of Adar Rishon needs to wait. Ad Chavtet L'Adar B'Shnat Yigil needs to wait till the 29th of Adar of his bar mitzvah year to become 13 years old. And the one who was born a day after him on the first day of Adar Sheni, so the year of his bar mitzvah is only one Adar. His bar mitzvah then is on Adar. Actually, I'm a Beis Adar Beis baby. Right, I was born on the second day of Adar Beis. So actually, this case, my bar mitzvah would preceded those who were born weeks before me. Right? Okay? So his bar mitzvah will be the first day of Adar, which could be weeks before a child who was born weeks. It'll be weeks before a child that he was born weeks after. Haga, the Ramah says, Umi shenolad ba'adar, a person who was born in the month of Adar, when there was just one Adar that year. The Nase bar mitzvah, Bishnat ha'ibor, and now his bar mitzvah year is during a year when there are two Adars. Eino Nase bar mitzvah ad Adar hasheni. The Ramah says he will not be bar mitzvahed until the second Adar. So now we have what seems to be, or could be presented as a contradiction in the Ramah. Because when it came to Yortzeit, what did he say? When it came to Yortzeit, what did the Ramah say? We go with the first Adar. When it comes to Bar Mitzvah, what does he say we do? We go with the second Adar. So I understand that Purim is its own orbit, because Purim we have that competing value of you want to have Purim and Pesach back to back. But over here where we don't have this competing value, so why is it that Yortzeit we go with Adar 1 and Bar Mitzvah we go with Adar 2? So that is a question that Rav Chaim from Brisk addressed, and he explained that really it's very different. Let's look at Yortzeit. Yortzeit is that when the day of this parent's passing comes around, that day must be treated with respect. Okay, so now that Adar, the parent died Adar, there was one Adar. Now this year there are two Adars. A person died on the 10th of Adar. Now, as the 10th of Adar 1 rolls around, it's the 10th of Adar. Is this the date that one's parent passed away? Yes. Therefore, this is the date that it must be treated with respect. Now, again, ideally, one would fast the second one also, because as we come around to next month, what do we have? Again, we have the 10th of Adar. Again, that's the date that a parent passed away. Again, that date must be showed respect, and therefore, ideally, one would fast on that day also. If you can't do both, so you take the first opportunity to show respect to the date, to the parent on the date that they left this world, and therefore, if you're going to pick one of the two, the Ramah says you pick the first one. Now, similarly, when it comes to making these days happy days that we don't say tachanun, and we don't fast, and we don't eulogize, so in a similar vein, it's because this was a day when a miracle happened for us. A miracle happened to us on the 14th and the 15th day of Adar. So every year, if today is the 14th and the 15th day of Adar, we treat that as a day of happiness. No fasting, no eulogizing. A month later again, we have that date again. So again, we treat it with happiness. No fasting and no eulogizing. So that's why we have that by the Yortzeit, and why we have that by giving those days importance. The Bar Mitzvah, Rav Chaim says, though, is a very, very different concept. When do I become Bar Mitzvah? When I am no longer a Katan. When do I have the ability to lead the services that other people will fulfill their mitzvah through me? When I am fully obligated, when I have left the realm of my being a Katan. Here's not an issue of, oh, this date has arrived. Let's treat it with reverence. Let's treat it with happiness. Let's treat it with reverence by a yard site. The date has arrived. Let's treat it with happiness. That Purim date has arrived. So there, each time it arrives, I've got to show the reverence. Each time it arrives, I've got to show that happiness. But over here, it's not that, oh, the date has arrived. Bar mitzvah, the idea is, I have left the realm of being a katan, of being a minor. I am now an adult. I have left the realm of being a katan. So if I was born on the 10th of Adar, I can't say I've left the realm of being a katan because the 10th of Adar is here if 30 days from now, what's going to happen? The 10th of Adar is still going to come. If I have another 10th of Adar still looming on the horizon, I can't say I have left. I have left that realm of being a minor, being a katan, with the first one. I only leave when it's fully behind me, when there will not be any more 10ths of Adar until, right, in my first 13 years, until that's completely gone, I have not yet left the realm. So he explains the difference is, one is commemorating either through respect or through happiness a date that has arrived. So then you will commemorate both those dates, or if we pick one of the two, you do the first one. But as opposed to not commemorating a date, but leaving, exiting from a certain stage. And I haven't exited the stage of being a minor, of being a katan, until both of those days are behind me. And that's why a boy or a child will become bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, b'nai mitzvah. They become b'nai mitzvah once that date, once they have completely left the area of that date, which is not when they finish the first one, but another one is looming, but once that is behind them. So therefore the result is Purim celebrated the second Adar, close to Pesach. Happy days not to eulogize or fast both months, because the date has arrived. Yortzeit could even be both months, the date has arrived, but if you're going to choose one, Ein ma'avin al mitzvah, we don't pass by a mitzvah, we do it the first one. Bar mitzvah, where we need to leave the realm of being a katan, of being a minor, we only leave it by the second one.
What a balagan.
That's why we have a reverence.
Huh?
Yes.
So how,
Exactly.
in the past I have, you know how in a Georgian calendar every fourth year is the leap year? How do they determine which 7 of the 19 have the Adar Shani?
Well, if it was 7 out of 21, it would be every third one, right? So it's every third, but every once in a while it's every other, right? And our calendar has been mapped out for us. We're on a 19-year cycle. I can't tell you it's 1, 3, 6, 8. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I could look that up for you and try to figure it out.
Even so, it has seemed sometimes to not be regular.
I think it's very regular within the 19 years. Within the 19 years, I think it is very regular. Yes.
Wasn't always that if you were confronted with something difficult like a court case or something, unpleasant, you always left that to March, to Adar.
Yes, actually the Gemara says Misha nichnas Adar marbim b'simcha.
But is it true also for Adar Aleph?
Huh?
Is it true for Adar Aleph?
So it's interesting. It would seem to be that it's really for Adar Bet, but I just recently saw this morning. I forgot exactly. I saw that I think the Chasam Sofer wrote a tshuva. He wrote a responsa, and he signed off his name and the date was, whatever was the 5th of Adar Aleph, Mishenichnas Adam Marbim B'Simcha. So he added that even over there. Yeah.
So this means you have a birthday coming up.
I've got a birthday. Yeah, we all do.
Yeah.
But yours is
Please
very
God.
personal.
Right. The question is
Yeah.
how far off, right?
Yeah.
My granddaughter celebrates 3 birthdays this year.
Adar Aleph, Adar Bet.
Yeah, she celebrates the 4th of March, 7th of Adar A, Aleph, 7th of Adar.
Nice. That's also Moshe Rabbeinu's
Yeah,
birthday.
I know, and that's the,
Yeah, definitely. And yours.
yeah, it's a very special day.
Okay. Yesher koach, everybody. Dov, thank you for setting up the video. And we'll call it over here. Bavakasha. Bavakasha.